Welcome to the 31st edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by Scott Beck. Scott returning from the U20 World Team Trials men's and U23 Nationals men's. And it felt a little bit like a women's wrestling convention because I saw a whole bunch of people that I know and you know. We'll start with the D3 men's or women's coaches because you have to know that they balance both. So a lot of times these D3 programs coach the men's and women's. Joe Norton was one of those, and he said that between the men's and women's programs, 99 wrestlers out for the teams.
Yeah, so what does he work, about 12 hours a week?
12 hours a week. Yep, that's it.
He
Yeah.
probably works 112 hours a week.
Yeah. And so they talked about how he doesn't really see his family all that much. So this guy grinds.
Yeah,
And there's a reason they're good.
yeah.
And then Joe Jamison from Ursinus, same thing, men's and women's. He was there for the men's. And the first time I think I've ever seen Justin Perch, the Aurora coach, without Lexie Janiak.
Yeah, those two are together a lot when you
So
see one, for sure.
now the women that I didn't see, Anya Drury, who's going to be in Final X, she was there to watch her boyfriend. I tried to get in touch with her to try to do an interview. It didn't work out. I think someone
Wait,
got
you said
sick.
a boyfriend? There was a Drury that wrestled in the competition. Is that her brother or
I heard
relative?
it's her cousin. Someone said
Okay,
it's her
okay.
cousin.
I
So
noticed the
yeah,
Drury, and I'm like,
Aiden
is that
Drury.
a, yeah, yeah, that's funny.
Aiden Drury. And then Lily Sherer, who we've brought up before, that
Yep.
is going to be a coach and has done some media things. She was there, didn't get a chance to see her. But the ones that I did see, I actually got pictures with them. Jaclyn Bouzakis was there watching her brothers.
Yeah, her
So that,
brother wrestled really well. He looked really good in the finals.
yeah, won the 61
Yeah,
kilogram
yeah.
U23 national championship. So
Yeah,
she,
he's a beast. He wrestles a very physical style. Like when he rips a cow catcher on, I mean, he's very physical. And again, his father Troy was in upstate New York, very very good acclaimed wrestler from New York State.
and then she also had another brother, Vince, was there. And what
Yep.
was cool is that not only is she a star in women's wrestling, high school women's wrestling, she's going to be a junior at Wyoming Seminary. She had just gotten a brand new camera and she was trying it out and taking pictures. So maybe she's going to get into the media space at some point. So let's hope so after a lengthy career in wrestling.
Very good wrestling family, just all really good. You know what's crazy though? You know, they had lost a sibling, unfortunately, passed away, and Nick always puts the hat on after, and he didn't after this title, and I was a little confused by that. And the commentator said something about it. I just have never seen him win and not put the Nick cap on, which is some reminder of his brother. They used to team Greco or something like that, and the brother was very tight with all of them. But not sure why, but a very good wrestling family.
Great family. And one of the things that Jaclyn said in an interview that we did was she wants to be better than her brothers.
It definitely gives me, someone to look up to, but not only to look up to, I want to be able to, do better than them.
They're both exceptionally good, but she's exceptionally good, and she wrestles very technical style. She's only going to get better, and if she keeps doing it, wants to do it, loves doing it, I absolutely think she can be better than brothers. No disrespect to Nick and Vince.
Two other people I saw, we were all wearing our Flow women's wrestling shirts. So I got a picture of all three of us. Samantha Miller, who was a four-time All-American for three different schools, went to Presbyterian, Mount Olive, and then ended her college career at McKendree. And Alyssa Pirro, who wrestled briefly at Indiana Tech and NAIA program. They were there helping out, doing some volunteer work and handing out trophies. So it was cool to have them there.
Yeah.
Angie Dill from New York. She wants to get into the photography game. She was a 2021 Cadet World Bronze medalist, so she was on the scene. That was fun to see that and see her taking great pictures. And then the one that we've talked about, Lexie Beadle. She is the Spire girl, and I've got my picture with her before, but not with the Spire in the background. So I made sure that when I was there, I got one. And it just happened, whoever took the picture, Big Spire was in the background, so I got it accomplished.
Yeah, it's funny. They changed the ad finally on Flow after a billion times, but as I said before, whatever she got paid for that ad, she did not get paid enough. If anything, she's the face of Spire Wrestling and a rock star. So it's pretty cool that you got to see her.
But this just leads into another thought as we think of all these women that were there and thriving and doing well, is just this idea of how you become a star, how you become a superstar. And I think in one, maybe two cases, there's such a thing for women's American wrestling as a transcendent superstar. And I just like to share a story that always comes to mind when I think about a star being born out of just watching someone compete, and that was at the 2019 Cadet World Championships. Sterling Diaz was in the lightest weight class, and she absolutely went from competition to at the end when she got a silver medal to becoming an absolute rock star by the end of that tournament. And I've talked to her about it, and she said she doesn't know why it happened. She still thinks about it.
I always think about that moment, especially after the match. Even though I lost, it still felt like I won, and there were so many people supporting me, and it just made me want to keep going, keep wrestling in, and keep doing what I love. And I was just so like overwhelmed with pure happiness and joy. I had so much gratitude in that moment, and to see so many people coming up to me and saying that I'm their inspiration and that they enjoy watching me wrestle is the reason why I keep doing it. It's the reason why I enjoy doing it. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Having watched it, I was part of that too. Just I'd never heard of her before that point, but the magnetism she had, the calm she had on the mat. Every time there was a break, she would just kind of pull her hair to get it situated again. People absolutely fell in love with her. And the most interesting thing is when they have the medalists, they sit and they get ready for the podium. The gold medalist was being ignored, and everyone was coming up to Sterling Diaz for pictures. And I've never in my life seen anything like that where someone absolutely goes and is a superstar within one event. And it just got me thinking about what it takes to become a star, a superstar. And it's part of it is results because you do have to win, but there is that it factor, that magnetism that comes through
Yeah.
that you want to be around that person, and it's almost unexplainable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the wrestling has to be, type of style that people like to watch, and they're very good wrestler. But there is like an it factor that, and you see, like many tournaments, there is like a buzz around, an athlete or two, even not always the most well-known ones, but somebody comes out of nowhere and just lights up a crowd, and you hear a lot of whispering around it, a lot of talking about that person in the back. I think obviously it happens with men. There's probably, obviously more rock star kind of type wrestlers as the sport's more kind of has a deeper fan base. But you see it where some of these ladies, they have this magnetism and yeah, people just start talking about them and everybody, there's just something about the way they conduct themselves and the way they wrestle and it draws people to them. And it is pretty interesting. I mean, I never heard of Sterling Diaz before that tournament. And then and I watched her wrestle and I was very impressed. And I still watch her wrestle, whenever I see her compete, so you don't forget once somebody kind of gets imprinted in your brain, you become kind of a fan slash follower of them.
But it was funny because what you said there is that allure, that magnetism, because the gold medalist was absolutely getting ignored, and Sterling Diaz was the star, even though it was the silver medal. I mean, she just won people over, and I think Jaclyn Bouzakis has that. I think she has that superstar personality, and she has the results to back it up. So good in interviews, she's articulate. I think she's a high school superstar.
Look, just lost last week. I think Sage Mortimer has that kind of where you watch her wrestle, and there's something about the way they compete and the way they conduct themselves that you can't help but become a fan. Bazaka's definitely. I mean, she's been deeply on my radar for a long time, and I love the way she wrestles.
And then just a couple other ones, and I think there's levels. I think that again, star, superstar, transcendent superstar. I think there's also levels of, is it high school, is it college, is it international? I think Kennedy Blades is one of those that has become a superstar because she has the results, and then it's the spectacular suplees and all of the throws, and she has that kind of personality where she is, she doesn't take it too serious. And I just think when you have that kind of presence on the mat, that's going to transcend. Tamira Mensah Stock had that. I mean, you talk about that that blast double and what she was able to do, and then the personality off of it. So I just think there has to be a combination of both. Results will only take you so far, and then there has to be some other component to get you the rest of the way.
Yeah, and when we use, you and I always talk about this, where, let's not get crazy with just. I'm not saying any of the people you named aren't transcendent superstars, but transcendent superstar is a kind of once in a kind of generation kind of thing where they're not a dime a dozen. These are the people that really have cult followings where they're just they're consistent, the way they wrestle hard, and they have just a magnetism that draws people to them, and they're not. There aren't that many really, that are transcendent. There's a lot of superstars. They're not transcendent superstars. Dan Gable is a transcendent. Cale Sanderson. I mean, these are transcendent superstars. Helen Maroulis, transcendent superstar.
Yeah, and I would say, Scott, that in my mind, I'd say one for sure transcendent superstar, and that's Helen. And I think the definition has to be that does that person have name recognition outside of the sport?
Yeah.
And it has to be that component to it. So I think Tamira Mensah-Stock being in professional wrestling now, I think she has that opportunity to do that. But I would say right now, there's probably only one, and that's probably Helen. Maybe Kennedy Blades because what she did, but I'd say there's really only one at this point.
I mean, this is going to sound really picky, but in my opinion, you're not even in the transcendent superstar discussion without an Olympic gold medal. It just is a requirement for a transcendent superstar, and that's the top of the top. And I know, listen, Adeline Gray, 6 world titles, more than is anybody. Is she a transcendent? Yeah, she probably is. Yeah, Adeline Gray is, but she doesn't have the Olympic gold medal. So is that a qualification? Maybe. I don't know, but we're talking though, recognition, people recognize, the first thing somebody asks is, did they win Olympic gold medal? When you're talking about a transcendent superstar.
And although Victoria Anthony isn't a transcendent superstar, she is a superstar, and she never had a world medal. It was the personality, it was the style, hitting the inside trips, with social media following. She has really that combination that does make her that.
Well, she's won, 2 junior world titles, but not a senior world title. But yeah, and it's an electric personality. It's kind of funny. You walk around Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, everybody knows everybody in the fight wrestling community, knows who Helen is, who Vicky is, these are just names in the combat sports community. You talk to, jiu-jitsu people, they know who they are, they've trained with them or they know them, and they hit, and Vicky, transcend, she's a superstar. She had transcended,
superstar.
Don't get me wrong. I love Vicky. It's not, but this is rarefied air we're talking about.
Where would we categorize Tatiana Suarez then? She is in the UFC. She won world bronze medals for the United States. She's known for her UFC, but she does have the background in wrestling. She's close if you want to just go that route and say someone that went beyond just wrestling and went into a different realm.
Yeah, clearly she's a combat sports superstar, and evidently, from what I've heard, she's probably the last domestic person to beat Helen. To make a team over Helen. It would have been interesting to see where she'd be if she didn't get hurt, but she's great, and I watch her MMA fights, so she's an absolute hammer. So she's in combat sports, yeah, she's probably there. Let's see, how far she goes. She wins a UFC title, then she's probably a transcendent superstar in combat sports.
But to add the transcendent part, I think it takes that component of Helen Maroulis had the movie out. Dan Gable had documentaries on HBO and Sports Century. I just think there has to be something that permeates into pop culture at some level.
Well, yeah, like Cael Sanderson, was the first undefeated 4-time national champ, right? And won an Olympic gold medal. Helen beat the GOAT. She beat Yoshida, right? 13-time world champ, 3-time Olympic champion. He beat her, right? So there's some marquee thing associated with it. Dan Gable didn't get scored upon in the 72 Olympics, And, we also some people remember, the Larry Owens match, right? But he had never lost before that. So there's there's like these mythical stories to them, I think when we're talking about like that get associated
And for them, for Kale and Gable, it was the athletic
coaching.
career and the coaching. I mean, Kale was on
Yeah.
the Wheaties box. Being in Iowa, I saw all of the hype, the bobblehead, and then he goes on and he's doing incredible things at Penn State. When you can maintain what you had as an athlete and then carry it on and go to even higher level in coaching, that's really what takes you to a new stratosphere.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and, John Smith was a 6-time world champ in a row, I believe,
Yeah.
and won a world title while still wrestling in college. And pretty difficult weight class to make the U.S. team at the time. It was just utterly stacked. As it was when Gable did as well. But
It is fun to see how it
yeah,
travels though, how you build that and who they are.
yeah,
I think Kylie Welker is a superstar. I mean, she has that style and the presence and you're just seeing
yeah,
it continue to build and success builds upon success and the more you get eyeballs and the more you can talk. I just think again with this docu series that's going to come out on the Iowa women's wrestling program, I think some of those will get
yeah.
star status if they don't have it already.
Yeah, and now when you and I were watching this stuff, following it when we were younger, we'd have to wait and get amateur wrestling news a week after the events. Now it's streaming. You have younger fans, people starting younger. Women's wrestling's growing, so we're going to have more superstars and the awareness and the media attention. I mean, it's I hope people can appreciate that, like wrestling, how lucky they are to be able to get results online and stream and go back and watch matches. I mean, I probably would have never left my room, if they had this stuff when I was younger.
And I stand by this. If you go to the Iowa women's wrestling program and for that 30-person roster, you are a star.
Yeah,
It's just automatic just because of the name. If you are an Iowa women's wrestler, that singlet, having that, tiger hawk on your chest, that makes you a star. There's something
yeah,
magnetic about it. It's incredible.
yeah, yeah. And wrestling cover Hawkeye is, borderline sacred ground, and it's pretty electric environment, and they've been drawing huge crowds, and it's very exciting. It's a great place to, train and wrestle, for sure.
Exciting news that has been, I think, long overdue. Lehigh is adding a women's wrestling program. Now, I should have had a different reaction. Mine was just more relief because I think we've probably heard this for a couple years now. And to finally get that across the finish line, it just feels so good to know that a program that does value wrestling, again, going back, one of the quotes is, it's not a sport at Lehigh, it's a religion. They value wrestling at Lehigh. So to have a women's wrestling program in Pennsylvania, I think this is a huge domino to fall for the sport of women's wrestling. Congratulations to Brazil Marquez and everyone behind that to make Lehigh women's wrestling a reality.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that finally. And it's just because we're talking about it doesn't mean it had to happen. It seemed inevitable, but I've seen things in my life that seem inevitable and they just don't happen. So congratulations to everybody. I'm glad they did. We talked about how the state of Pennsylvania in women's wrestling, which the state of Pennsylvania is one of the best high school states for sure, if not the best. Ohio may have something to say about that, but Pennsylvania's phenomenal. And they were behind with women, and now they've really caught up. Wyoming Sem brought the team, but it's not just Wyoming Seminary. It's the actual, public and parochial high schools. They've gotten, behind women's wrestling and really kind of caught up, and they're very deep and tough. And now, have Lehigh as a school that these athletes can attend is phenomenal. We'd love to, and then we'll segue, we'd love to see, University of Pennsylvania be another one, Ivy League school there. And, I know Emma Randall had, emailed me, and at some point we're hoping we'll have the same discussion with Columbia. We'll be relieved that they finally do it. Maybe the other Ivies follow. And Emma was just talking about, the athletes she has coming on, next year. It's just, it looks like a roster from a regular college. There are ladies from, Georgia, South Carolina, a couple New York City, New Jersey, Utah, Washington, Oregon, California. And it's not just, they have good wrestling accolades, many of them, most of them, or at least state place winners, if not all Americans, but academically just very diverse, strong group of young ladies in the sciences and other majors. And this is like, if the administration is looking at this and seeing that, I'm assuming these ladies are able to get in on their kind of own accord if you look at their academic credentials. But I'm sure, I know Emma did a lot of work, and I'm sure she pieced the team together. And there's got to be some type of, watching over this and saying, look, Emma, you're doing this. If you did this, we will ultimately, become an NCAA sport. And I'm thinking it's going to happen relatively soon there. I would hope and believe, and it certainly has the feel of a legitimate, recruiting class. So, kudos to her, and Emma, keep going, and thanks for sharing that with us.
And I think we can do a better job of the theory of motion creates emotion, because I have always been resistant to mention it, because you don't want to get ahead of it and you don't want to spill the beans and, we're thinking about it. But if you talk about it, Ned Shuck, who is the head men's coach at Bellarmine, he said that they're planning on, or at least looking toward, adding a women's wrestling program in 2027 season. And I asked, I said, can I bring that up? He said, absolutely. He said, we want there to be energy. We want people talking about it. We want people talking about Tarleton State. They've been talking about it. It looks like they're pushing toward it. We talked about Columbia, Oklahoma State. It seems like they are building a recruiting class where they could have some energy or some synergy to bring a D1 wrestling program. So I think as you see dominoes drop, Lehigh, Tarleton State can add. You have Delaware State adding this year. All of a sudden, you just start knocking some of these off, and slowly you start building these programs. I think that's what it takes. But it has to be a conversation, because ADs don't just want to sit back and say, well, if we add, no one's going to talk about it. It has to be talked about, and it has to be in the public eye.
For sure. I think awareness absolutely helps. And you never know which random person may hear somebody's talking about something, some powerful alum that might have wrestled hears about it, then calls the AD. You don't know where the pressure is going to come. I mean, we know the sources. Obviously, the main pressure is going to come from strong alum that are committed to this, that are working with the administration. Like, for example, Columbia, like Akira Barry, who's very supportive of this and has supported, the New York RTC and Columbia and Beat the Streets. But you don't know where maybe some random person hears somebody talking about it, where awareness is created. So I think it's important that, it's mentioned, talked about, and the community, goes behind it, especially if you get these schools that we know are getting close. And then maybe sometimes you don't know what alum or what administrator might hear something and just give the impetus to give that last push to get it done. You don't know.
And Ned Chuck also said he had a conversation with Damian Hahn, who's the men's coach at South Dakota State. He said he gets bombarded with people asking, when are you going to start a women's program? And so I would have never even guessed that until I got that piece of information from Ned. So you have to get that public, because I wouldn't have known that. Now that you can share that people are talking about that, and that's going to be across the board for a lot of D1 men's programs. I'm guessing a lot of people are asking that question.
Yeah, and maybe it helps to have, a club run by, Seth Gross and Ronna Gross in that area now. They've both gone back there, and, and Ronna's, competed again. So maybe the athletes need somewhere to go, so it's, that would be great if South Dakota State did. They have a great men's program, obviously. And, I think wrestling's big in the Dakotas. Terry Steiner.
Yeah, big time states for that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
And so right now,
and Fargo.
Fargo's right there.
Love Fargo.
Hotbed. So. Yeah, recruiting hotbed, especially at NDSU. You could get up there.
Yes.
Yeah, you could recruit all those girls to NDSU. Now, right now, 6 programs. Let's hope Tarleton State goes in that direction. That would be 7. Now, if you get Oklahoma State to add in with that at some point, boy, now you're really starting to build something special, because you have a nucleus of Division I teams that can merge with the D2 and D3. Now you're talking about some more competitive balance, and I just think that's the direction we're going. It feels like there's momentum. I know feel isn't always an indicator of what's actually going to happen, but it just feels like there's some real progress being made with some of these important programs getting added.
Yeah, it seems like things were slow for a little while, and now they're starting to get more momentum, and it's good to see, and I expect it to continue.